The world is addicted to predictable storms. People see dark clouds and they wait, phones ready, faces turned, craving the drama. They expect the sky to split, the rain to pour, the chaos to feed them. They need the storm to perform. But what happens when the storm refuses? When the thunder doesn't break? When the rain never falls? When the lightning holds back instead of striking? That's the Sigma. He's the man who carries the weight of force without needing to unleash it. The one who could flood the room, drown egos, or shatter illusions, but doesn't. And that restraint is what drives people mad. Because they aren't used to power they can't provoke. They aren't used to someone who isn't desperate to show what they've got. They're used to storms that spend themselves to be seen. But the Sigma, he keeps his sky heavy. Here are 10 truths about why the Sigma withholds what everyone waits for and why it terrifies the crowd. 1. He understands that power, unspent, is power multiplied. You don't waste bullets proving you own a gun. Most people flex early. They show their hand to secure approval. They burn their energy to get claps from the stands. The Sigma knows that the more you hold back, the more people wonder. The less you reveal, the more they imagine. Every word he doesn't say, every move he doesn't make, builds tension. People expect an explosion. They wait. They get restless. They talk. And in that silence, his power grows, not because he's hiding weakness, but because he refuses to leak strength for free. A storm doesn't need to rain to remind you it can. 2. He doesn't play to the crowd's schedule. They want a show on demand. He gives silence on purpose. The crowd lives in instant gratification. They want the climax now, the punchline now, the outburst now. The Sigma doesn't dance to that tempo. He lets moments breathe. He lets tension rot into discomfort. When they expect him to react, he stays still. When they want him to spill, he shrugs. This drives the impatient insane. They mistake his timing for passivity until they realize its precision. He doesn't move when they call. He moves when it matters. And by then, it's too late to stop him. 3. He knows that restraint cuts deeper than rage. A punch can bruise, restraint can haunt. Anger is loud, messy, and burns fast. Restraint, however, lingers. When a man could have destroyed you but didn't, that mercy can weigh heavier than the blow. The Sigma understands that letting someone stew in their own expectation is more punishing than giving them closure. They want the argument, they want the fight, they want to pull him into their chaos. He denies them the satisfaction, and denial cuts deeper than confrontation. 4. He refuses to spend energy on the unworthy. Not every challenge deserves a champion. The crowd believes every provocation demands a reaction, as if silence is surrender. But the Sigma is surgical in his selectivity. He understands that responding to every bait is just free advertising for mediocrity and a waste of ammunition on targets not worth the shot. He doesn't get dragged into trivial battles because every swing costs energy, and his energy is reserved for wars that alter landscapes, not skirmishes that entertain bystanders. He refuses to burn daylight explaining himself to people who are committed to misunderstanding him. There is no return on that investment. If the field isn't worth stepping onto, he leaves it empty, forcing his would-be opponents to flail in the dark. Let them swing at air. Let them tire themselves into collapse. Exhaustion is a more satisfying victory than any counterattack could deliver. 5. His silence forces others to fill in the blanks. When you give them nothing, they'll write their own nightmare. Human beings can't stand not knowing. Silence is a vacuum, and the Sigma uses it like a weapon. Instead of clarifying, defending, or oversharing, he lets people speculate. And in that speculation, they often imagine something far greater than the truth. They think he's plotting. They think he's holding some secret weapon. They think he's more dangerous than he actually is. And sometimes they're right. Either way, the uncertainty keeps them on edge. 6. He understands the currency of mystery. When they can't predict you, they can't prepare for you. Familiarity breeds complacency, and complacency breeds carelessness. Once people convince themselves they've figured you out, they stop respecting you, stop guarding themselves, and start underestimating you. The Sigma never lets them reach that point of comfort. His unpredictability is not an act of chaos, but a refusal to be mapped. He will appear when it serves him and vanish when it suits him, slipping through social patterns like smoke in a sealed room. One day he's present and engaged. The next he's a ghost without explanation. One conversation he's disarmingly open. The next he's unreadable granite. This volatility is intentional. It forces people to remain on edge, never sure where they stand or what's coming next. They can't prepare for what they can't track, and when a man becomes impossible to scout, he becomes something more than untouchable. He becomes a factor they can neither plan for nor neutralize. 7. He withholds because he's not here to entertain. A storm doesn't exist to impress you. The crowd believes everything exists for their consumption. They think power exists to be displayed, wisdom to be shared, and emotion to be public. The Sigma rejects that entitlement. He doesn't perform his life for an audience. He doesn't open the gates of his mind for casual tourists. When you're not in the business of being liked, you're free to keep the best of yourself private. 8. He knows that not all battles are won by action. Sometimes the most strategic move is no move. The crowd mistakes movement for progress, assuming that constant motion equals victory. They've been trained to see stillness as weakness, but the Sigma plays a longer, colder game. He understands that the world rewards those who act with precision, not those who burn themselves out in a frenzy of reaction. By holding his ground and refusing to be baited, he creates space for people to reveal exactly who they are. In their eagerness to fill the silence, they overextend, overtalk, and overcommit, mistaking his composure for inaction. All the while, he's absorbing information, tracking patterns, and letting their own momentum work against them. When he finally moves, it's not from impulse, but from strategy, decisive, surgical, and final. His action feels inevitable, as if it had been loaded and ready long before they even realized they'd walked into range. 9. He values peace over proving a point. You can win an argument and still lose your peace. Ego is hungry for the last word, desperate to be the voice that echoes after the dust settles. Strength, however, understands the quiet satisfaction of leaving the echo chamber empty. The Sigma has no interest in exhausting himself to prove his superiority to anyone who's already made up their mind. He knows that most arguments aren't about uncovering truth. They're contests of dominance, verbal duels staged to feed pride. In that arena, even victory can cost you your peace. He refuses to pay that price. So he chooses silence, even when the air is thick with provocation, even when the crowd leans forward expecting an eruption. That choice is deliberate, infuriating, and deeply unsettling to those who crave his reaction. Because they learn the hardest truth of all, they cannot summon him into battle without his permission, and that denial robs them of the war they so desperately wanted. 10. He knows that real power is measured in what you don't use. The lion doesn't need to roar for the jungle to know he's there. In the end, the Sigma's greatest weapon is the one he rarely draws, a blade kept sheathed not from fear, but from supreme control. His restraint isn't weakness, it's mastery honed over years of understanding that true strength is not in the strike, but in the decision to hold it back. He could shatter their pride with a single sentence, dismantle their illusions with one calculated move, leave them staggering in the wreckage of their certainty, but he chooses not to. That choice over and over again is what defines him. It's the discipline of a man who knows that every act of mercy is also a declaration of dominance, that the shadow of what he could do often looms larger than the act itself. Because when you finally understand you don't have to spend your power to prove you own it, you've already won the only game that matters, and you've done it without lifting a hand. On a final note, they came for the storm. He left them with the silence. The Sigma isn't here to give people the drama they crave. He's not here to reign on command. He's not here to prove his force to those who need the show more than the substance. He is the storm that refused to reign because the greatest display of strength is deciding when, where, and if you ever will. And that's why they hate him. Not because he struck, but because he could have and didn't.